So, using the same article here on social connectiveness, self-esteem, and depression symptoms among college athletes and non-athletes, I want to take a look at what it means when we say that results have statistical significance. So, let's remind ourselves that in this study, they were looking to see if there was a difference between college athletes and non-athletes in regards to whether there was a significant difference in their social connectiveness, student self-esteem, and depression. And then they looked at some other variables such as gender, whether or not they were an athlete or not. So let me tab over to the results. So here, there are a couple of things that you'll note in the article. So here are some statements where they write that we found statistically significant correlation in all three measures. Um, the research identified that there was a linear correlation between social connectiveness and one's self-esteem. Um, let's see, when they looked at whether the student was an athlete, and male or female. We see here that they state that there were statistically significant differences between college athletes and non-athletes on the level of self-esteem and social connectiveness and depression. Um, so this implies that, social networks and support are the foundation for most of these athletic teams. Um, Again, if we keep reading, and this rolls over to the next page here, but when we look at predictors of depression in college students, they found that there was a statistical significance in differences between personal characteristics between college athletes and non-athletes. So we keep reading that the results they found were statistically significant in terms of finding differences in these different variables. So what does that really mean? So in statistical significance, I'll write it on the blank page here. So statistical significance basically means that when you're doing a study, the results that you get in your study, so after you do the analysis, after you analyze all the data that you collected, you're going to use different methods, and we'll learn about some of these methods starting in Chapter 8, where we look at hypothesis testing. But there is a mathematical way for us to determine the probability or the likelihood of getting the result that we got in our study. So if it turns out that the results that you got had a very low chance or a small probability of occurring, that means that the results have statistical significance. So the criteria that we use to determine what is considered a low probability or likelihood of occurring is 5% or less. So if there is a 5% or less chance or probability of getting the results that you got in your study, then we say that you got that result, right? Because there is some difference. A difference actually does exist. You didn't get that result due to chance. So if it turns out that the probability is higher than 5%, then we say that you probably would have gotten that result anyways due to chance from your random sample. And so it's not really significant. Okay, so for example, you can have a study where, let's say, you analyze the results and you find out that there is a difference between, depression between male and female students. But let's say that, okay, yeah, there's a difference. Maybe females have depression symptoms more than male students, but that difference isn't significant. In this study, though, they found out that there was a significant difference in that female students do experience depression at a higher rate than male students. So that's what statistical significance means and how we determine whether our results have statistical significance. Now, practical significance is when we take a look at our results and we say, okay, our results might have statistical significance, but is there any practical significance to our results? Meaning, can we use our results and apply it to something that is practical. And in this particular study, their results were statistically significant and they're also practical. So, for example, when they find out that there was no statistical difference, so there was no significant difference between athletes versus non-athletes in regards to their social connectiveness, sense of self-esteem, and their depression level, then there is a practical significance to that result in that, if colleges are trying to support students' mental health, then they need to not just target athletes, but they need to target all students and maybe more specifically cater to female students. So there is some practical significance there. So with that said, you also want to keep in mind that there are times where studies may show that there is a statistical significance, but maybe there's really no practical application with those results. And the last thing I want to mention with this article is towards the end, usually studies will write out any limitations that they had in doing the study. So in this particular study, there were some limitations. It's listed in this paragraph down here. But one thing to keep in mind is they remind us that their sampling method, they use convenient sampling. So maybe the person who was doing the study just had easy access to this particular group of students from this specific college. So it was convenient sampling. So we have to take that into consideration when we think about the results that they found. Also, the other thing that I want to mention here is it says that, let's see here, it says that we use convenience sample to survey, therefore the study reflects only one college and the results cannot be generalized to college students or college athletes nationally. So here we cannot generalize these results to the entire population. So how do we solve that problem? What if I'm still interested in knowing about the relationship between social connectiveness, self-esteem, and depression symptoms among college students, but I want to know what's happening in the population. So one way that we can really understand the population is, and we do this a lot in statistics, is we repeat our study. So maybe we take the same exact study, but we repeat it. So we do the same study, but we gather samples from other colleges. And again, we just repeat the study as many times as possible. The other solution is to make our sample size larger. So if we can have a larger sample size, right? The larger your sample, obviously, the more representative it is of the population.